You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. Our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. First, though, our top stories here tonight. And the Prime Minister has said there's a body of evidence that an airliner which crashed, killing 176 people, was shot down by an Iranian missile. But it may have been a mistake. Royal staff have been told to speed through arrangements for Harry and Meghan to step back from their roles as senior royals. And the British and Irish governments have tabled a draft agreement to restore devolved government in Northern Ireland 3 years after it collapsed. Hello there, you're watching the press preview. Our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. Over the next half an hour, we're going to be talking about the headlines with the Observer's chief leader writer, Sonia Sodha, and the Mail on Sunday's deputy political editor, Harry Cole. So very good evening to you two.
Evening.
So let's take a look then at what's making the front pages. And the Daily Telegraph reports that the Queen has called a family crisis meeting following Harry and Meghan's decision to step back from their roles as senior royals. The Daily Mail says the Duchess of Sussex has reportedly fled to Canada to rejoin her son, leaving Prince Harry in the UK to face crisis talks with the Queen. Harry up and go. The Metro has the Queen urging Harry and Meghan to quickly sort out their plans to step away from senior royal duties. Sort it out now. The Daily Express reports that the Queen has told the couple to sort out their future within days, not weeks. According to The Times, Prince Charles has threatened to halt Harry and Meghan's cash. The Guardian, meanwhile, reports that Western officials believe the passenger jet that crashed in Iran was shot down by an Iranian missile. The Financial Times leads with concerns that an anti-aircraft missile may have unintentionally brought down a passenger jet in Iran, killing 176. Well, Sonia Sodha and Harry Cole are here with me tonight, and really only two stories in town.
Yeah.
And actually, the bulk of the papers have gone with day two of the royal story, haven't they? You've picked out the Daily Mail, first of all, and this, of course, is the response to that surprise statement from Harry and Meghan that they wanted to step back from those senior royal roles. The Daily Mail saying that Meghan has gone to Canada.
Yeah, I mean, this story is extraordinary. From yesterday afternoon, you know, it was sort of calm before the storm, and suddenly it broke. And it's the speed that it's moving at. Meghan was, you know, first of all, it was Harry and Meghan that are going to go to North America. And now it's Meghan and Archie who have already gone.
Well, I think the story suggests that Archie never
was in
Canada. So you can
There's no doubt that, you know, the royals were completely blindsided with this. There is absolute abject fury. I've dealt with very, you know, on the fringes of my journalism is dealing with royals, but I know that they say very little. The palace say very little when they can help it. For them to make it known how furious the Queen is, it's an absolutely astonishing story. Obviously, there's, you know, this huge international story breaking with Iran and the plane crash. But, you know, it's a clean sweep. You know, frankly, the royals sell better papers than plane crashes.
Yes, that's interesting, and we will come to the Iran story, of course, in a moment. But let's just reflect on what you were saying. That suggestion that the Queen is upset about it. You used the word furious. It's the word that is used on the front of the Daily Express. They say furious Queen orders sort it out now, and this is the news that we've had this evening. That there's what's been described as crisis talks, but certainly discussions going on at the highest level to find out how this new status for this couple could work.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of briefing from palace sources, and that's kind of all over the front pages with this talk of crisis talks. And that's something, you know, that's the way it's always been. Sort of officials have always kind of leaked what's going on behind closed doors. So I doubt the Queen herself would have sanctioned these stories coming out. But the reaction from the palace seems to have been an incredibly negative one. And in fact, the official briefing straight after that statement was announced was that, you know, the Queen was sort of very disappointed, which is really going very, very far for the palace. I mean, normally the sort of statements you see from the palace are sort of incredibly restrained. So I think a lot of royal watchers were quite surprised, actually, with how far it sounds sort of restrained, but I think they were quite surprised at how far the palace went. And, you know, the emphasis seems to be on getting this resolved really quickly, so it doesn't drag on for weeks or even months. And, I mean, I think there clearly is sort of a lot of disquiet at Buckingham Palace about how Meghan and Harry decided to sort of put this story out there. Apparently, personal statement, website already set up. They were given very little warning. But I suppose if you were to sort of look at the other side, what Harry and Meghan might say would be, we've tried to discuss this with the palace. It probably would have taken years to sort out behind closed doors. And so maybe this was their way of just trying to expedite the process. But it really does mean that these sort of disagreements are out in the open.
The crucial development being tonight is that we're learning that the fact the Queen and her courtiers actually said, don't do this, don't make any rash statements, and they willfully ignored that. Now, the problem with, this pulling the Band-Aid off quickly, let's get this out in the open, let's do this in public rather than behind the scenes, is actually they've rushed the announcement. Actually, they look a little bit silly. They look a little bit tin-eared. The idea that they said they're going to become self-sufficient because they're going to give back the 5% of their income that they get from the taxpayers through the sovereign grant, but actually still be reliant on Prince Charles, who draws his income from the estates of the Duchy of Cornwall. You just think, to most people, that is not economic self-sufficiency. That's having your cake and eat it. And I think there's something incredibly tacky, actually, about how they made this announcement, setting up that the royal websites are actually, if you're on an official royal website, like a government website, because you've got the .uk, they've set up this ridiculous Sussex royal website. So what they're saying is that we don't want to be royals, we don't want to be frontline royals, but we want the money, we want the house, and we're going to capitalise on the royal brand by using our names and our titles around the world to try and raise money and become self-sufficient. And you just think,
do you think that's right, or do you think, Sonia?
I think this really does smack of a very, very rushed announcement that hasn't been well thought through. And the irony of this is that if you look at what Prince Charles wanted to do with the monarchy over the long term, he really wanted to slim it down. He's been talking about that for kind of over a decade. So it's not like, I think, where Harry and Meghan wanted to get to was necessarily tugging against where Prince Charles eventually wanted to take the monarchy. It's just that I think they've really sort of expedited the process. Now, if you look at the context around this, they're two people who are clearly not very happy with the roles that they've got. You've had Prince Harry talk very openly about the mental health issues that he's suffered, his real distaste for the way that his wife has been hounded by the tabloid press in the wake of the treatment of his mother, Princess Diana, by the tabloid press. So you can see this is incredibly emotive for both of them. She's just had a baby. So there is a context around this, but I think if they'd been sort of thinking about this for the long term, more of this would have been worked out before they went public with it. Because I actually agree with Harry.
I'm just going to bring another point.
Okay.
I agree with Harry that giving up 5%.
Prince Harry's doing tomorrow night.
5% of your income and saying we're going to take a step back. Something about that doesn't. And I think if you want to be financially independent, I think absolutely, if they want to take a step back and they want to be part of a slim down, they want the monarchy to be slimmed down, that's absolutely fine. But they've got to give up some of the trappings that go with that, like the free residence at Frogmore Cottage and this, the slice of the 5 million that they get from Prince Charles.
Let me just show the front page of the Daily Telegraph to reflect the fact that quite a few papers are going with the same thing. The Queen calls family crisis meeting, and then if we move on to the Metro as well, they've also got a sense that the Queen is angry. Obviously, we don't know how the Queen does feel. They're saying hurry up and go. The suggestion there that she wants them out.
Well, they're briefing tonight that they want a solution within days rather than weeks rather than months. They call it the firm for a reason. It's remarkable in its survival. It's obviously it's been blindsided, but the wagons are now closing, and they are going to get through this. They are going to make this work. They're summoning the Canadian government tonight, the British government. They're summoning the US government, by all accounts, to make this work. That said, whether it will, and whether this is actually just a sort of thin end of the wedge, and whether you truly can be an independent business person and a royal, and just all they need to look at is the other spare. Look at Andrew. Look at this. Look at the absolute chaos that he's got himself into because he was trying to make a living. He was trying to scratch a living on top of what he was already given, and that's just when the royals and business, the royals and business mix, it never ends well.
It's very difficult because when you look at it's not even just Prince Andrew, but other royals who've tried to minor royals who tried to sort of have their own businesses. It's very difficult because when the businesses do well, people just say, well, they're just capitalising on the royal name, and if things go badly, then they're letting the royal brand down. So it's it's going to be very difficult, I think, for them.
Yeah.
Maybe they will be able to manage it because they have incredible sort of, an incredible following. If you even just look at their Instagram account, it's got sort of 10 million followers. They're very, very popular.
Well, that's right, and amongst those supporters, there will be some people who are incredibly sympathetic. They'll say, they're saying, we don't want to take too much money from the public purse. We want to be financially independent and buy ourselves a bit of privacy.
They've realised that the majority of that following isn't in this country; it's in the United States. And actually, I think there's something.
Do you think?
The British public too, though.
I think they were very popular. I think if you just go back to the engagement, to the wedding, to the goodwill then, and I think in the last year that's just ebbed, in the last 20 months that's just ebbed away with each of these public. I think they've very much misjudged the public mood as well, because also they launched this extraordinary attack on royal correspondence, and yes, there have been examples where they've been fallen out with the press, no doubt about that.
But do you understand that, given the extra sensitivity, given what happened?
Absolutely. But you've got to know. But you've got to look at the fact. You've got to look at the bigger picture. That about 95% of everything written about the royals is overwhelmingly positive. They use the newspapers and they use the broadcast media to help their causes, to the patrons, the patrons of the charities.
I think that might be true of the royal family in general, but I think Meghan looking at that will not feel like certainly not the case at 95% of her coverage would have been positive.
And she was given every opportunity to become patrons of various cultural charities in this country. Who the newspapers went along with that. They went to the launches, they went to the events, they did the interviews.
But I think the
door has just been slammed.
But I think that they feel that the problem isn't that coverage, and Prince Harry himself is referenced. You get some of that positive coverage, but it's the sort of real focus and the vilification of Meghan in some parts of the tabloid press.
I just think it's been massively overblown. I'd like to see some examples of where this is. Just because her father is.
Just look at the numerous columns that Piers Morgan have written about her.
We're talking about news, though. We're talking about news reporting. They're slamming the door, on royal correspondents who have a pool system that allows smaller media organisations access to the royals, which they'd never be able to get. And you know what? This lot have just said, thanks, we'll do our own Instagram. And you just think, no wonder it's on the front page of every paper, because, they've been trying to help. And actually, this is what their reward is.
Let's take a look at the front page of The Times, shall we? Because you talked about it being questionable whether or not they can find financial independence. The Times is suggesting that the money that they would fall back on, if you like, having taken away the sovereign grant,
the 95%.
Times must be so tough.
The 95% comes from Prince Charles, essentially. They're suggesting that he may not carry on funding them.
Well, I don't think
we don't know if that's true, obviously, but
I actually don't think it's sustainable, and I think that shows the extent to which this was a rush announcement and it wasn't that well thought through. The sovereign grant only makes up 5% of their income. They get a huge chunk of their income from Prince Charles, and that comes from the Duchy of Cornwall, which is not private wealth that's owned by the Crown. It's that the income that comes from that, the heir to the throne has got a right to. So it's still public money, just in a different type of public money. And I think this idea that they can still get a big chunk of that 5 million whilst they're taking a step back, that just isn't going to wash. That does feel a bit like having your cake and eating it. So I think that is all going to have to be worked out. And I would be very surprised if they're still getting, whatever it is, just over £2 million a year from Prince Charles in a couple of years' time.
And on top of that is the money that the royals get, which we're never allowed to talk about. They never publish the numbers. They never really tell us. Is the cost of the security. There's a reason they're afforded these lovely flats in Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace and in central London, because they're all these secure locations that are already guarded. All the royals are there in one place. Same with Windsor, with Frogmore Cottage. It's an easy place for them to protect. To let them wander off into LA and into the Canadian wilderness, the spiralling cost of this. And no one's doubting actually that we shouldn't. The taxpayers shouldn't pick up the costs for royal security. Just cost benefit of it far outweighs the cost of the risk of it. And actually that bill is going to go soaring through the roof. And are we expecting Canada to help pay for it?
And I think,
are we expecting America to help pay for it? I mean, this is just ridiculous that they've just
we'll have to,
done a tweet and announced it without any of this being hammered out.
Okay, we're going to leave your questions hanging in the air, Harry. We will quickly show the Star just as we leave this this subject. They've gone with "Naff Off Harry" is their headline there. I'm sure there'll be plenty.
Speaks to the nation.
Well, it's for you, I suppose. Others may not agree. Anyway, we're going to take a break. Coming up, why Western officials believe that the plane that crashed in Iran was shot down. We're going to be talking about that after the break. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me tonight, Sonia Sodha and Harry Cole. We're going to turn to the other big story of tonight. It's on the front page of a few of the papers, The Guardian being one of them. Their headline there, Ukraine jet downed by Iranian missile, Western officials believe. And we've heard from Canada tonight, Justin Trudeau, but also Boris Johnson saying that the suggestions from intelligence sources are that it was an Iranian missile that brought down that plane yesterday.
I think intelligence sources, both public and private, I think, there's some extraordinary pictures surfaced this afternoon online of what appeared to be a Russian-made missile on the ground. The video of the actual moment is circulating on social media. It's horrible. I mean, this puts royal rows in perspective, doesn't it? There was a bit of a, I think sigh of relief is slightly the wrong term, yesterday morning when actually Iran responded finally to the assassination, the droning of their general, and actually the response wasn't, it wasn't enough for Trump to be able to step back. It was enough for the Iranians to save face. And actually no one was, no British or American service personnel were killed. But in the back of everyone's mind, there's too much of a coincidence that this plane could possibly have done it. And, this is an absolute disaster for Iran. I mean, when the entire world's focus and attention is on them, when they've lost one of their most significant and key sort of power bases in the country with General Soleimani, and now they've done this, and you just think, if this isn't enough to convince even the most hardliners and the most radical people in Iran to stop and pause and think, is there any way back to the credible international community if you're going to be doing things like this, even if it was by accident?
Well, that's right, and that's a key word, isn't it?
I think
I'm just going to bring in the Times because they include that in their headline. Plane carrying 176, we should remember a huge number of lives lost, was shot down by Iran in tragic accident. The suggestion being that this may well have been a mistake. And we should also say that Iran is saying tonight they call this explanation illogical, and they also call it psychological warfare.
I mean, they would say that, wouldn't they? But all the intelligence so far that we've seen is suggesting that it was unintentional. So no one's ramping it up yet and saying it was intentional. And, there's a huge loss of life on this flight, 176 people on board. 63 of those people were Canadians. There were 10 British nationals and a lot of Iranian...
Was it 10 British nationals? I thought it was 4. But
4 British nationals. Sorry, it was 10 Swedes, you're right. Absolutely, thanks for correcting me. And 79 Iranians. So it would be a strange thing if it was intentional, given there were so many Iranians on the plane. But, I mean, it's an absolutely kind of huge story. It would be an unintentional mistake of kind of absolutely monumental proportions. And I think the question, really, that everyone will be turning to will be, what are the implications of this on the incredibly volatile situation in the Middle East? And I think the hope has to be, as Harry has said, that actually a huge tragedy like this actually may lead to a bit of a dialing back of the rhetoric and the escalation. And hopefully that's where we will go after this.
Accident or not, this wouldn't happen in a normal functioning country. Let's be honest. This doesn't happen in London. This doesn't happen in America. The American army don't shoot down passenger jets. What I thought was really interesting.
They might be under attack again.
What I thought was really interesting tonight is, yes, there is one element of the Iranian regime saying this is all psychological warfare and fake news. There's another one which has said actually Boeing can come in and inspect it, and there is the Iranian Foreign Ministry tonight have said yes, they will cooperate with Boeing, which is, it looks to me like the beginning. This morning they were saying no, this is all a fire. It was all an accident. The plane tried to.
And we're going to do our own investigation.
We're going to keep the black box. And actually now they're actually saying no, Boeing can come in. So you can see already a bit of a schism in the regime, which can only be a good thing.
OK, I'm going to move us on. Front page of the Telegraph now. You can see that the main body of it is actually occupied with the royal family. This is a tiny story at the bottom, but which is extraordinary given we've been talking about it.
Absolutely. So before the general, this would have been a huge moment before the general election. The bill that Theresa May, then Boris Johnson spent months trying to get through the Commons has passed today.
Sailed through with a 99 majority.
Sailed through, no drama, and it just goes to show the difference that a general election makes. Absolutely. And the fact that Boris Johnson got this huge majority. It went through with very little controversy. You still saw lots of amendments being tabled. The government sort of batted all of them away. And yeah, you get a little tiny little paragraph.
A couple of words. We're out of time, I'm afraid. But we'll see you both again at 11:30 for the moment. Thanks very much. And do join us at 11. We've got all the top stories coming up in just a moment.